The wild stallion reared up on his hind legs, hooves slashing the air just inches from her face, and Maggie Callahan knew she had about 3 seconds to decide whether she was brave or just plain foolish. She stumbled backward in the dust of the corral, her boots sliding on loose dirt as the black horse came down hard, snorting and tossing his magnificent head. It was late August in 1882, and the Montana sun beat down mercilessly on the small ranch her father had left her 6 months ago when cholera took him. The ranch hands had all moved on to bigger outfits after his death, leaving Maggie alone with debts piling up and a stable full of half-wild horses that needed breaking before she could sell them. At 23 years old, she had learned to shoot, to mend fences, to butcher a steer, but she had never learned to break a horse by herself. Her father had always handled that part, his gentle but firm way with animals, something she had watched but never quite mastered. The stallion charged at the fence line, testing the posts, and Maggie wiped the sweat from her forehead with a dusty sleeve. She had been at this for 2 hours already, trying to get close enough to put a halter on him, and all she had to show for it was bruised pride and skinned knees. The horse was beautiful, all rippling muscle and wild spirit, and she knew he would fetch a good price in town if she could just settle him down enough for a buyer to see his potential. But right now, he looked at her with rolling eyes that held no trust, only fear and defiance. She picked up the rope again, coiling it in her hands the way she had seen her father do 100 times. Her dark hair had come loose from its braid and stuck to her neck in the heat. She wore men's trousers and one of her father's old work shirts, practical clothing that scandalized the church ladies in town, but made a lot more sense when you were trying to run a ranch alone. The stallion watched her approach, muscles tensing, ready to bolt or fight. "Easy now," she murmured, keeping her voice low and steady, even though her heart hammered in her chest. "I am not going to hurt you. I just need you to trust me enough to let me put this rope on you." The horse snorted and wheeled away, kicking up a cloud of dust that made her cough. She was about to try again when she heard the creak of saddle leather behind her, and a low voice that seemed to carry amusement and concern in equal measure. "You are going to get yourself killed doing it that way." Maggie spun around, nearly dropping the rope. A man sat astride a gray mare just outside the corral fence, one leg hooked casually around the saddle horn as he watched her with eyes the color of weathered denim. He was tall, she could tell even with him sitting, with broad shoulders and the kind of lean, weathered face that came from years of outdoor work. He wore a dusty black hat pushed back on his head, revealing dark brown hair that needed a trim, and his hands rested easy on the saddle like he had been born on horseback. A faded blue shirt rolled up at the sleeves showed tanned forearms, and a worn leather vest completed the picture of a working cowboy who had seen his share of hard miles. "I did not ask for your opinion," Maggie said sharply, embarrassed to have been caught struggling. She lifted her chin, trying to look more confident than she felt. The cowboy swung down from his horse with an easy grace, looping the reins over the fence post. He was indeed tall, at least 6 feet, and could not have been more than 26 or 27. He had a few days of stubble on his jaw and a small scar through his left eyebrow that gave him a slightly roguish look. When he smiled, which he did now, it was slow and genuine. "No, you did not ask," he agreed. "But that horse is going to hurt you if you keep coming at him head-on like that. He thinks you are a predator, not a partner. And I suppose you know better?" Maggie tried to keep the defensive edge out of her voice, but failed. "I have broken my share of horses," the man said mildly. He stuck out his hand through the fence rails. "Name is Cole Brennan. I am passing through on my way to the Triple Bar Ranch. Heard they might be hiring on for the fall roundup. Saw you working in here and thought I would stop and see if you needed a hand." Maggie hesitated, then shook his hand briefly. His grip was firm and calloused. "Maggie Callahan, this is my ranch, and I can handle my own horses, thank you." Cole studied her for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. "I am sure you can handle a lot of things, Miss Callahan, but that particular horse is scared out of his mind, and scared animals do not think straight. Neither do scared people, for that matter." He nodded toward the stallion, who had retreated to the far side of the corral and stood watching them both with wary eyes. "Let me show you how to earn his trust. Not break him, earn his trust. There is a difference." Something in his voice made Maggie pause. It was not condescending or boastful, just matter of fact, the way a carpenter might offer to show someone how to properly plane a board. She glanced at the stallion, then back at Cole Brennan, weighing her pride against her practical need to get this horse ready for sale. "Why would you help me?" she asked suspiciously. "You do not even know me." Cole shrugged. "Maybe I am just a helpful sort. Or maybe I figure good deeds come back around eventually. Besides, it is too hot to ride another 10 miles to the Triple Bar without taking a rest." He smiled again, that easy smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "You got a well with cold water? I will work for a drink and the shade of your barn for an hour." Despite herself, Maggie felt her resistance crumbling. She did need help, much as she hated to admit it. And there was something about this drifting cowboy that seemed genuine, not like the men in town who looked at her ranch with greedy eyes and made offers to buy her out for pennies on the dollar. "There is a pump by the barn," she said finally. "Help yourself, and then you can show me what you mean about earning trust instead of breaking." Cole touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement and headed for the pump. Maggie watched him go, noting the confident way he moved, the careful way he approached his own horse to unsaddle her and give her access to the water trough. He talked to the mare in a low voice, running his hand along her neck, and the horse nickered softly in response. Whatever else Cole Brennan might be, he clearly knew his way around horses. When he returned to the corral, he did not climb over the fence right away. Instead, he leaned against it, just watching the stallion. Maggie came to stand beside him, curious despite herself. "What are you doing?" she asked after a few minutes of silence. "Letting him get used to me being here," Cole said quietly. "Right now, he is wound tight as a watch spring. Every time you go in there with that rope, he sees it as a threat. You gotta let him settle, let him see that you are not going to chase him or hurt him." "But I have been working with him for weeks," Maggie protested. "He has had plenty of time to get used to me." "Working with him or working at him?" Cole asked gently. "There is a difference. How did you approach him the first day you tried?" Maggie thought back, feeling defensive again. "I went in with a rope and a halter, just like my father always did." "And how did the horse react?" "He ran from me. They always run at first." Cole nodded slowly. "And every day since then, you have been coming at him with that rope, trying to catch him, and he has been running or fighting. So, in his mind, you are the thing that chases him, that tries to trap him. You are the danger." He glanced at her. "It is not your fault. Most folks break horses that way, wearing them down until they give up fighting. But there is a better way, a way that makes a horse want to work with you instead of just being too tired or too scared to fight anymore." "And you know this better way," Maggie said, not quite able to keep the skepticism from her voice. "I learned it from a Crow elder up in the territory a few years back," Cole said. "He could gentle the wildest Mustang you ever saw, and they would follow him around like dogs afterward, not because he broke their spirit, but because he made them feel safe." He pushed off from the fence. "Let me show you, but you gotta promise me something." "What is that?" "You gotta be patient. This does not happen in an hour or even a day. It takes time." Maggie thought about the bills sitting on her father's desk, the mortgage payment due in 6 weeks, the dwindling supplies in her pantry. She did not have time, not really, but she also did not have many options. "All right," she said finally. "Show me." Cole climbed over the fence, moving slowly and deliberately. The stallion's head came up immediately, ears pricked forward, muscles bunching for flight. But Cole did not move toward him. Instead, he walked to the center of the corral and simply stood there, his body turned slightly away from the horse, not making direct eye contact. "What are you doing now?" Maggie called from the fence. "Being boring," Cole replied, "and non-threatening. See how he's watching me but not running? That is because I'm not chasing him. To him, I am just part of the landscape right now." Minutes passed. The sun beat down. Sweat trickled down Maggie's spine. The stallion stood at the far end of the corral, sides heaving slightly, watching Cole with intense focus. Then, so gradually she almost missed it, the horse took a step forward, then another. "Do not move," Cole said quietly, whether to her or himself, Maggie could not tell. The stallion stopped, snorted, then took another step. His ears were forward now, no longer pinned back in fear or aggression. Cole remained still, just a man standing in the sun, not a threat. Another few steps and the horse stopped again, this time close enough that Maggie could see his nostrils flaring as he tried to catch Cole's scent. Very slowly, Cole extended one hand, palm up, fingers relaxed. He did not reach toward the horse, just offered his hand. The stallion stretched his neck out, nostrils working, and snuffled at Cole's palm. Then he snorted and wheeled away, trotting back to his corner. Cole smiled. "Progress," he said. "That is progress?" Maggie asked doubtfully. "He ran away from you." "But he came to me first," Cole pointed out. "That is the first step. He chose to come closer. I did not make him." He climbed back over the fence, his shirt damp with sweat. "That is enough for today. You keep doing that, just being present without demanding anything, and he will come around." "I do not have weeks to spend just standing in a corral," Maggie said, frustration bleeding into her voice. Cole looked at her more closely then, really seeing her, and Maggie found herself uncomfortable under that steady blue gaze. She knew what he was seeing. A woman alone, wearing men's clothes, trying to do a man's work on a struggling ranch. She lifted her chin, daring him to comment. "You are in trouble," he said finally. It was not a question. Maggie considered lying, then decided there was no point. "My father died 6 months ago, left me the ranch and a stack of debts. I need to sell these horses to make the mortgage payment, but I cannot sell them until they are broke enough to ride. The bank will not give me an extension, and everyone in town is waiting for me to fail so they can buy the land cheap." Cole was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the distant mountains. "How many horses you got to break?" "6, including that stallion. He is the most valuable, though, if I can get him settled." "And how much time before the bank comes calling?" 6 weeks, maybe 7 if I can sweet-talk the banker, but he is not the sweet-talking type." Cole nodded slowly, seeming to come to some internal decision. "The triple bar is not going anywhere. I could stay on here for a few weeks, help you get these horses ready, in exchange for meals and a place to sleep in the barn." Maggie stared at him. "Why would you do that?" He met her eyes, and she saw something in them she had not expected. Respect. "Because you are trying to do something hard, and you are doing it alone, and I admire that. And because my mother raised me to help folks when I can." He smiled slightly. "And because I am tired of drifting from ranch to ranch. A few weeks in one place sounds pretty good right about now." She should say no, she knew that. It was not proper, a young woman alone with a strange man, even if he did sleep in the barn. The town gossips would have a field day. But propriety did not pay mortgages, and pride did not break horses. "Meals and a place to sleep," she said finally. "And when we sell the horses, I will give you 10% of what they bring." Cole stuck out his hand. "Deal." They shook on it, and Maggie tried to ignore the little flutter in her stomach when his hand engulfed hers. It was just relief at having help, she told herself. Nothing more. That night, Maggie cooked supper for 2 for the first time in 6 months. She had been making do with simple fare, beans and bacon and pan bread, but with a guest, she felt obligated to make more of an effort. She fried up chicken from the hen house, made biscuits, and even opened a jar of the preserves her father had loved. Cole ate with the focused attention of a man who had missed too many meals, praising her cooking in a way that was sincere rather than flattering. "You said you learned about gentling horses from a Crow elder," Maggie said as they ate at the rough wooden table in her kitchen. "How did that come about?" Cole took a drink of water from his tin cup. "I was working on a ranch up near the Yellowstone River, maybe 4 years back. Got thrown from a half-broke Mustang and broke my arm pretty badly. The rancher sent me to recover at a Crow village where he had friends. Old man named Runs Far took care of me, set the bone properly. I spent about 6 weeks there, and he taught me his way with horses. Said most white men broke horses the hard way because they were impatient, always in a hurry to get to the next thing." He smiled at the memory. He was right about that. "And you have been drifting since then?" Maggie asked. "More or less. Worked ranches from Wyoming to Colorado to here. Never stayed anywhere too long. I guess I have been restless." He glanced around the kitchen, taking in the worn but clean surroundings, the faded curtains at the window, the shelf of books that had been her mother's. "This is a good place, though. Your father built something solid here." "He did," Maggie agreed quietly. "I just wish he had taught me more about running it before he died. He always said there was time, that I would marry someday, and my husband would handle the business side of things." She heard the bitterness in her own voice. "But I did not want to marry any of the men in town, and then he got sick so fast. By the time I realized how serious it was too late to learn everything I needed to know." "You are learning now," Cole pointed out. "That takes guts." They talked late into the evening, the conversation flowing easily in a way that surprised Maggie. Cole told her about the places he had been, the ranches he had worked, always moving, never settling. Maggie told him about growing up on the ranch, her mother who had died when she was 12, her father who had been both parents to her after that. It felt good to talk to someone, to not be alone with her worries for a few hours. When Cole finally headed out to the barn to sleep, Maggie cleaned up the dishes and found herself humming, something she had not done in months. Then she caught herself and frowned. She could not afford to get comfortable with Cole Brennan being here. He was a drifter. He had said so himself. He would help her with the horses and then move on, and she would be alone again. That was just the way of things. The next morning, Cole was up before dawn, and when Maggie came out of the house with coffee, she found him already working with the stallion. He was in the corral again, but this time he had a long rope, and he was using it to guide the horse in circles around him. It was not the aggressive chasing Maggie had tried, but something more like a dance, Cole's body language communicating with the horse in a way she did not quite understand. "You are asking him to move," she observed, handing Cole a cup of coffee through the fence rails when he paused. "I am showing him that I can control the space," Cole explained, taking a grateful drink. "But I am also showing him that when he does what I ask, I reward him by letting him rest. See how he is watching me? He is starting to think of me as the leader, the one who makes the decisions. That is what you want. Not a scared horse who obeys because he is too tired to fight, but one who trusts you to lead." Over the next several days, Maggie watched and learned. Cole worked with the stallion every morning and evening, gradually getting closer until finally the horse allowed him to touch his neck, his shoulder, his flank. Each touch was brief at first, then longer, until Cole could run his hands all over the horse's body without the animal flinching away. "Now you try," Cole said one morning, gesturing for Maggie to come into the corral. Her heart hammered as she climbed over the fence. The stallion eyed her warily, remembering, no doubt, all the times she had chased him with a rope. But Cole stood at the horse's shoulder, one hand on the animal's neck, calm and reassuring. "Move slow," Cole instructed. "Let him see you coming. Talk to him." Maggie approached, her hand outstretched, murmuring nonsense in what she hoped was a soothing voice. The stallion's ears flicked back and forth, uncertain. Then she was close enough to touch, and she laid her palm against his warm neck, feeling the power in the muscles beneath the skin, the quick beat of his pulse. "Good," Cole said quietly. "Now, just stand there. Let him get used to you being close without anything bad happening." They stood like that for several minutes, Maggie's hand on the horse's neck, Cole's presence steady and reassuring. Then the stallion let out a long breath and lowered his head slightly, and Maggie felt a surge of triumph. "He is relaxing," she whispered. "He is accepting you," Cole corrected. "That is even better." They worked together after that, Cole teaching and Maggie learning. He showed her how to read a horse's body language, the subtle signs of fear or relaxation, aggression or curiosity. He taught her to move with confidence but not aggression, to be firm but never harsh. And slowly, day by day, the stallion transformed from a wild, frightened animal into something gentler, more trusting. But it was not just the horses that were changing. Maggie found herself watching Cole when she thought he was not looking, noticing the way he moved with easy grace, the way his face softened when he smiled, the sound of his laughter when she said something that amused him. She told herself it was just loneliness, just the natural result of spending so much time with the only person around. But when he accidentally brushed against her while they were working with one of the other horses, and she felt a spark of something that was definitely not just loneliness, she could not deny it anymore. She was attracted to him. More than attracted. She was starting to care about him in a way that was dangerous for a woman who needed to keep her wits about her and her heart protected. 3 weeks into his stay, Cole had the stallion wearing a halter and walking calmly on a lead rope. 2 of the other horses were ready to be sold, gentle enough for inexperienced riders. Maggie should have been thrilled with the progress, but instead, she felt a growing sense of dread. The closer they got to having all the horses ready, the closer Cole got to leaving. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch steps watching the sun set behind the mountains. The air was finally cooling after another scorching day, and crickets sang in the grass. Cole had his hat off, his hair damp with sweat, and he looked tired but satisfied. "You did good work today," he said. "That mare was ready to buck you off, but you stayed calm, and she settled." "I had a good teacher," Maggie replied, then felt herself flush at how that sounded. Cole glanced at her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. You are a fast learner. Your father would be proud of what you are doing here. I hope so, Maggie said quietly. Sometimes I feel like I'm just fumbling through, hoping I do not make a mistake that costs me everything. That is called being alive, Cole said with a slight smile. Nobody has all the answers. You just do your best and hope it is good enough. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sky turning from gold to pink to purple. Then Cole cleared his throat. I have been thinking, he started, then paused as if not sure how to continue. About what? Maggie prompted when he did not go on. About staying on after the horses are sold, he said, not looking at her. If you wanted the help, I mean. A ranch this size, there is always work to be done, and winter is coming, which means firewood to chop, fences to mend before the snow, animals to care for. He finally turned to meet her eyes. I know you can do it alone. You have proven that, but maybe you do not have to. Maggie's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. You want to stay? She said, trying to keep her voice level. I want to stay, he confirmed. If you will have me. There were 100 reasons to say no. She barely knew him. People would talk. She could not afford to pay much in the way of wages. But all of those reasons seemed to pale in comparison to the one reason to say yes. She wanted him to stay. Not just because she needed the help, but because somewhere in the past 3 weeks, Cole Brennan had become important to her. His presence had filled a loneliness she had not even fully acknowledged. His laughter had brought joy back into her life. And when she imagined him riding away, leaving her alone again, something in her chest ached. I would like that, she said quietly. I cannot pay much, just room and board and a share of the profits when we sell cattle in the spring. But if that is enough, that is more than enough, Cole said, and the smile that spread across his face was like the sun coming out. Thank you, Maggie. It was the first time he had used her first name without the miss in front of it, and the sound of it in his low voice did something to her insides. She smiled back, feeling lighter than she had in months. The next week, they took 2 of the horses to town to sell. It was market day, and the streets of Benton Creek were crowded with ranchers, farmers, and townspeople. Maggie drove the wagon with Cole riding alongside, leading the 2 geldings they had spent weeks gentling. They were fine-looking animals, well-muscled and calm, and Maggie hoped they would fetch a good price. She was right to be hopeful. A rancher from the next county over saw the horses and immediately wanted to try them out. After a brief test ride, during which both horses performed beautifully, he offered a price that was more than fair. Maggie negotiated up a bit, just on principle, and they shook hands on the deal. 2 horses sold, and enough money to make a dent in her debts. They were loading supplies into the wagon for the trip home when a voice called out, Miss Callahan, I need a word with you. Maggie turned to see Randall Simmons, the banker, hurrying toward her. He was a small man with a narrow face and calculating eyes, and Maggie had disliked him since the first time he had suggested she sell the ranch and move to town to become a seamstress, as if she would give up her father's legacy to spend her life sewing other women's dresses. Mr. Simmons, she said coolly, I was planning to come by your office tomorrow with a payment. Yes, well, about that, Simmons said, his eyes flicking to Cole and then back to Maggie. I am afraid there have been some developments. The bank has decided to call in your loan early. Maggie felt the blood drain from her face. What? You cannot do that? I have 6 weeks left before the next payment is due, and I have the money right here to make it. The terms of the loan give the bank the right to call it in if we feel the debt is at risk, Simmons said, his voice taking on a sanctimonious tone. And with you out there alone, trying to run a ranch by yourself, well, the bank feels that is too much risk. We need full payment within 2 weeks, or we will have to foreclose. That is impossible, and you know it, Maggie said, her voice shaking with anger. I cannot come up with that much money in 2 weeks. Perhaps you should consider Mr. Hardy's offer to purchase the property, Simmons suggested. He has been very generous, really. He is willing to pay enough to cover your debts and leave you with a bit extra to start fresh somewhere else. So that was it. James Hardy, who owned the biggest ranch in the county and had been trying to buy her land for years, had finally found a way to force her out. Probably had Simmons in his pocket, if the banker's smug expression was any indication. I will not sell to Hardy, Maggie said flatly. That land is mine, and I am keeping it. Then you will need to come up with full payment in 2 weeks, Simmons said with a shrug. I am sorry, Miss Callahan, but business is business. He walked away, leaving Maggie standing in the street, feeling like she had been kicked by one of her horses. 2 weeks. How could she possibly sell enough horses in 2 weeks to pay off the entire loan? He is crooked as a dog's hind leg, Cole said quietly beside her. I have met his type before, always working an angle. Knowing he is crooked does not help me, Maggie said, fighting back tears of frustration. I cannot come up with that much money in 2 weeks. Even if I sell every horse I have, it would not be enough, and most of them are not ready to sell yet. Cole was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. Then he said, The stallion. He would bring a premium price if we can get him broke to saddle in the next week or so. And I heard there is a wild horse sale up in Silverbow City next week. Rich buyers come from back east looking for fancy horses. That stallion is beautiful enough and spirited enough that he might fetch twice what he would bring around here. Maggie looked at him, hope and skepticism warring in her chest. He is not broke to saddle yet. He has only just accepted a halter and lead rope. Then we have a week to get him ready, Cole said. It is possible if we work with him every day, multiple times a day. It will be hard on him and on us, but it is possible. And if we push him too hard and undo all the trust we have built, Maggie asked, then we are no worse off than we are now, Cole pointed out. But if we do not try, you lose the ranch for sure. At least this way, you have a fighting chance. He was right, much as she hated to admit it. She did not have the luxury of taking her time anymore. All right, she said, let us try. The next week was the hardest Maggie had ever worked. She and Cole were up before dawn and worked until well after dark, spending every possible moment with the stallion. They built on the trust they had already established, gradually introducing new things. A saddle blanket across his back, then a saddle, then the feeling of weight in the stirrups as Cole leaned across him. The horse balked at each new step, frightened and uncertain, but Cole's patience and calm persistence won out each time. 5 days into their intensive training, Cole climbed into the saddle for the first time. Maggie held her breath as the stallion stood trembling, every muscle tense, ready to explode. But Cole just sat there, talking in that low, soothing voice, his hands gentle on the reins, and gradually the horse relaxed. They walked a few steps, then a few more, and then Cole was riding him around the corral at a walk while Maggie watched in amazement. You did it, she breathed. We did it, Cole corrected, dismounting and patting the stallion's neck. He trusts you as much as he trusts me, maybe more. By the time they loaded the stallion into a borrowed horse trailer and headed for Silverbow City, Maggie felt cautiously optimistic. The horse was not fully broke, not by a long shot, but he was gentle enough to ride and beautiful enough to catch a buyer's eye. It would have to be enough. Silverbow City was bigger and busier than Benton Creek, with wide streets and multi-story buildings that made Maggie feel like she had stepped into a different world. The wild horse sale was being held at a big auction barn on the edge of town, and when they arrived, the place was already crowded with buyers and sellers. Maggie felt out of her depth immediately. The other sellers had fancy tack and groomed horses, while she had a barely broke stallion and worn equipment. But when she led the black horse out into the viewing area, she saw heads turn. The stallion was magnificent, his coat gleaming in the sunlight, his proud head and powerful build drawing appreciative looks. That is a fine-looking animal, a well-dressed man said, approaching Maggie. He had the accent and expensive clothes of someone from back east, and he looked at the stallion with an appraising eye. Is he as spirited as he looks? He has spirit, but he is not mean, Maggie said, choosing her words carefully. He is young and still learning, but he has a good temperament, and he is very intelligent. May I see him move? The man asked. Cole, who had been standing quietly nearby, stepped forward. I will ride him for you, sir. The man watched as Cole put the stallion through his paces, and Maggie could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. When Cole dismounted, the man nodded thoughtfully. I will give you $400 for him, he said. It was a good offer, more than Maggie had dared hope for. But she also knew that if this man was offering $400, the horse might be worth even more to him. She thought about her father, who had taught her never to take the first offer, and she took a deep breath. I appreciate the offer, but I cannot take less than $600, she said, her heart pounding. The man's eyebrows rose. That is quite a price for a half-broke horse. He is an exceptional horse, Maggie countered. You will not find another one like him at this sale, and you know it. They haggled back and forth, and eventually settled on $550. As the man counted out the money, Maggie felt relief and sadness in equal measure. The stallion had been trouble from the start, but she had grown fond of him. Still, $550 was enough to keep the bank at bay for a while longer. As they prepared to leave Silverbow City, Cole touched her arm. That took courage, negotiating like that. You did real well. I was terrified, Maggie admitted, but I kept thinking about what my father would have done. He would have been proud, Cole said firmly. On the long ride home, Maggie counted and recounted the money, trying to figure out if it would be enough. With what they had made from the other horses, she might be able to pay off about half the loan. It was not enough to satisfy Simmons, but maybe she could negotiate, get more time to sell the rest of the horses. When they got back to the ranch, exhausted and covered with trail dust, there was a note tacked to her door. Maggie's hands shook as she opened it, fearing more bad news. But the note was from Tom Gardner, a rancher she knew slightly from church. He had heard she was selling horses and wanted to know if she had any suitable for his teenage sons to learn on. He would pay fair prices for the right animals. This could be the answer, Maggie said, showing Cole the note. I have 3 more horses that are almost ready. If I can sell them to Gardner, between that and what we already have, it might be enough. They worked even harder over the next few days, putting the final touches on the 3 remaining horses. Cole spent hours riding them, getting them used to different gaits and situations, while Maggie worked on grooming them until their coats shone. When Tom Gardner came by to look at them, his sons in tow, Maggie held her breath. The boys test rode all 3 horses under Cole's supervision, and their father watched with a critical eye. Finally, Gardner nodded. They are good horses, calm, but not lazy. I will take all 3. What are you asking? Maggie named a price, fully expecting to negotiate, but Gardner just nodded. Fair enough, I will have the money for you tomorrow when I come to pick them up. After Gardner left, Maggie did the calculations. With the money from these 3 horses, plus what they had already made, she would have just enough to pay off the loan in full. It would leave her with almost nothing in the bank, but the ranch would be hers, free and clear. She found Cole in the barn, caring for his mare, and she could not stop the smile that spread across her face. We did it. I have enough to pay off the loan. Cole looked up, and the relief and happiness in his expression matched her own. That is wonderful, Maggie. I knew you could do it. I could not have done it without you, she said seriously. If you had not stopped that day, if you had not shown me how to work with the horses the right way, I would have lost everything. Cole set down the brush he had been using and walked over to her. You would have found a way. You are the stubbornest, most determined person I have ever met. I do not know if that was a compliment or an insult, Maggie said with a laugh. Definitely a compliment, Cole said, and something in his voice made her look up at him. He was standing close, closer than he usually did, and his blue eyes were intense. Maggie, I need to tell you something. Her heart started to race. What is it? I did not just stay because you needed help with the horses, he said quietly. I stayed because I wanted to be near you. These past weeks working with you, talking with you, they have been the best I have had in a long time. Maybe the best I have ever had. And I know I am just a drifting cowboy with nothing to offer, but I care about you. A lot. Maggie's breath caught in her throat. She had hoped, but she had not dared to believe. Cole, you do not have to say anything, he said quickly. I just needed you to know, and if you want me to move on now that the horses are sold, I will understand. Move on? Maggie repeated, finding her voice. Are you out of your mind? Why would I want you to move on when I have been falling in love with you for weeks? Cole's eyes widened. You have? Of course I have, Maggie said, feeling a mix of exasperation and joy. I have been trying not to because I thought you would leave as soon as the work was done. I thought I was just a job to you, a problem to be solved before you moved on to the next ranch. You were never just a job, Cole said, and then he was cupping her face in his hands, his callous thumbs gentle on her cheeks. You were the reason I have been finding excuses to stay, the reason I wake up happy for the first time in years. Maggie Callahan, I am in love with you. She did not know who moved first, but then his lips were on hers, and it was everything she had imagined in her secret thoughts late at night. His kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, but when she kissed him back, it deepened, becoming something urgent and passionate. She wound her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, and his arms came around her waist, holding her like she was precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Maggie laughed with pure happiness. "I guess you are not going anywhere then?" "Not unless you send me away," Cole agreed, his forehead resting against hers. "And maybe not even then. You might have to get the sheriff to drag me off the property." They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other, and Maggie felt a peace she had not known since her father died. She was not alone anymore. She had someone who cared about her, who respected her strength but was willing to stand beside her, not in front of her or behind her, but beside her as an equal. The next day, Maggie went to town and paid off her loan in full. The look on Randall Simmons' face when she counted out the money was deeply satisfying. He sputtered something about being surprised she had managed to raise the funds, and she smiled sweetly and told him she had faith that hard work paid off. She did not mention Cole, did not give Simmons the satisfaction of knowing she had help. Let him think she had done it all herself. When she walked out of the bank, free and clear, Cole was waiting for her by the wagon. "How does it feel?" he asked. "It feels like I can breathe again," Maggie said. "The ranch is mine, truly mine now." "Ours," Cole corrected gently. "If you will have me as a partner in this. I know it is your land, your legacy, but I would like to help you build it into something even better, if you will let me." Maggie took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I would like that. But Cole, people are going to talk. An unmarried woman and a man living on the same property." "Then marry me," Cole said simply. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I also know what I feel, and I know what I want. I want to spend my life with you, working this ranch, building a future together. If you need time to think about it, I understand. But the offer stands." Maggie looked at him. This man who had ridden into her life when she needed help most, who had taught her patience and trust, who had worked beside her without complaint or expectation of reward, who looked at her like she was the most amazing thing he had ever seen. She thought about going back to being alone, and then she thought about waking up every morning with Cole beside her, facing whatever came together. "Yes," she said, "I will marry you." Cole's face broke into a smile that lit up his entire face, and he swept her into his arms, spinning her around right there on the main street of Benton Creek, not caring who saw. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, and Maggie heard some scandalized gasps from passers-by, but she did not care. Let them talk. She was happy. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in town. Maggie wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, and Cole bought a new shirt and vest for the occasion. Tom Gardner and his family came, and a few other ranchers who respected Maggie's determination. Even the preacher, who had initially been skeptical about performing the ceremony so quickly, seemed moved by the obvious love between them. After the ceremony, they went back to the ranch, which was now officially their home together. Cole carried her over the threshold, making her laugh, and then they spent their first evening as husband and wife sitting on the porch watching the sun set, planning their future. "We should get some cattle in the spring," Cole said. "Build up a herd, and maybe fix up the barn, replace some of those rotted boards." "And I want to start a garden, a real one," Maggie added. "My mother used to grow vegetables and sell them in town. I think we could do that again." They talked and planned late into the night, and when they finally went to bed, Maggie felt a contentment she had never known. This was what partnership felt like. This was what love felt like. The winter came, and with it the hard work of keeping a ranch running in the cold. But it was easier with two of them. Cole chopped firewood and mended fences while Maggie managed the house and the few animals they still had. They worked together, planned together, and at night they fell into bed exhausted but happy. In the spring, they bought a small herd of cattle with the money they had saved. Cole knew cattle as well as he knew horses, and he taught Maggie the business of ranching. They worked from dawn to dusk, branding calves, mending fences, moving the herd to fresh pasture. It was hard work, but they were building something together, and that made all the difference. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch after supper, Maggie said, "I have something to tell you." Cole looked at her, curious. "What is it?" "I am pregnant," she said, watching his face. "The baby should come in late autumn." For a moment, Cole just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms. "We are going to have a baby? Truly?" "Truly," Maggie confirmed, laughing at his excitement. Cole placed his hand on her still flat stomach with a sense of wonder. "A baby. Our baby." He looked up at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You have made me the happiest man alive, Maggie Brennan." The pregnancy was not easy. Maggie was sick for the first few months, and Cole fussed over her like a mother hen, insisting she rest more and work less. She argued with him, insisting she was fine, but secretly she loved his protectiveness. He was going to be a wonderful father. As summer turned to autumn and Maggie's belly grew, they prepared for the baby's arrival. Cole built a cradle from smooth pine wood, sanding it until it was soft as silk. Maggie sewed tiny clothes and blankets. They argued good-naturedly about names, Cole wanting to name a son after Maggie's father, and Maggie wanting to name a daughter after Cole's mother. In late October, on a crisp morning when the aspen trees were golden and the air smelled of coming snow, Maggie went into labor. Cole rode to town to fetch the doctor's wife, who served as midwife, and then he paced the house like a caged animal while Maggie labored. It was a long, difficult birth, and there were moments when Cole feared he would lose her. But Maggie was strong, stronger than anyone he had ever known, and just after dawn, she delivered a healthy baby boy. When the midwife placed the squalling infant in Cole's arms, he felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," he whispered, staring down at his son's red face and tiny fists. "He looks like you," Maggie said tiredly from the bed, her face pale but happy. They named him Samuel after Maggie's father, and he became the center of their world. Cole proved to be as patient and gentle with his son as he was with horses, holding the baby for hours while Maggie rested, singing to him in a surprisingly good voice, teaching him about the ranch from the time he could focus his eyes. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. Samuel grew into a sturdy toddler, then a curious little boy who followed his father everywhere. 2 years after Samuel was born, Maggie gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace, who kept their parents busy with their energy and mischief. The ranch prospered under Cole and Maggie's management. They built up a good herd of cattle, earned a reputation for raising quality horses, and slowly expanded their land holdings. It was never easy. There were droughts and harsh winters, sick cattle and broken equipment, but they faced it all together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole surprised Maggie by taking her to the spot where they had first met, the corral where she had been trying to break that wild stallion. He had built a new house there, a proper ranch house with glass windows and a stone fireplace, a big kitchen, and separate bedrooms for their children. "I wanted to give you something special," he said, watching her face as she took in the house. "This is where our life together started, where you showed me what real courage looks like. I wanted our forever home to be here." Maggie had tears in her eyes as she walked through the house, touching the smooth walls, admiring the craftsmanship. "Cole, it is beautiful. How did you manage this without me knowing?" "Tom Gardner helped," Cole admitted, "and a few other neighbors. They worked on it while you were in town visiting with the pastor's wife. I wanted to surprise you." She threw her arms around him, kissing him soundly. "I love it. I love you." They moved into the new house the next week, and it quickly became a home filled with laughter and love. Samuel was 10 now, already showing his father's way with horses. The twins were 8, wild and fearless, climbing trees and riding horses like they had been born in the saddle. 2 years later, Maggie gave birth to one more child, another boy they named Thomas, after Tom Gardner, who had become a good friend. Thomas was the baby of the family, doted on by his older siblings and adored by his parents. As the children grew, the ranch continued to thrive. Samuel became Cole's right hand, working alongside his father with the cattle and horses. The twins proved to have their mother's head for business, helping Maggie manage the accounts and negotiate sales. Even little Thomas, still in short pants, declared he was going to be the best cowboy in Montana when he grew up. One evening, when Maggie was 42 and Cole was 45, they sat on the porch of their house watching the sunset. The children were all inside, arguing good-naturedly about something, their voices a happy background noise. Cole reached over and took Maggie's hand, lacing their fingers together the way he had done 1,000 times before. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, taking a chance on a drifting cowboy who showed up out of nowhere. Maggie squeezed his hand. "Not for a single moment. You gave me everything I needed when I needed it most: patience, partnership, love. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the part where you were trying to break that stallion and nearly got yourself killed, Cole teased. Even that, Maggie confirmed with a smile, because it brought you to me. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you had just ridden past that day, if you had decided I was not worth stopping for. I saw you in that corral, so determined and so fierce, and I knew I had to stop, Cole said. It was like something was pulling me there, fate, maybe, or just dumb luck. But whatever it was, I am grateful for it every single day. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. After 23 years together, they had built a life that neither of them could have imagined in those early desperate days. The ranch was successful, their children were healthy and happy, and they still loved each other with a depth that had only grown with time. "Do you remember what you told me that first day?" Maggie asked. "About earning trust instead of breaking it?" "I remember," Cole said. "You were not just talking about horses, were you?" Maggie said softly. "You were talking about us. About earning my trust, letting me see that you were not going to hurt me or leave me." Cole turned to look at her, his blue eyes still as clear and honest as they had been the day they met. "Maybe I was, or maybe I was talking about both. Building trust, whether it is with a horse or a person, it is the same principle. You show up, you are patient, you prove you are reliable, and eventually, they let you into their heart." "You definitely got into my heart," Maggie said, her voice thick with emotion. "You are in so deep, Cole Brennan, that I cannot imagine my life without you." "Good," Cole said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it. "Because you are stuck with me until the end." As if on cue, Samuel came out onto the porch. He was 20 now, tall and broad-shouldered like his father, with his mother's dark hair and determined chin. "Ma, Pa, the twins are arguing about who gets to take the wagon to town tomorrow, and Thomas spilled milk all over the kitchen floor. I think you better come settle things before it turns into a full-scale war." Maggie and Cole exchanged an amused look, then got up to go deal with their children. As they walked into the house together, their hands still linked, Maggie thought about how far they had come from that hot August day when a wild horse and a drifting cowboy had changed her life forever. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of joys and sorrows. They lost friends to age and illness, celebrated marriages and births, weathered economic downturns and personal challenges. But through it all, Maggie and Cole stood together, their love the foundation on which everything else was built. When Samuel was 25, he married a schoolteacher from town named Clara, and they built a house on the far corner of the ranch. A year later, they gave Maggie and Cole their first grandchild, a little girl with Clara's red hair and Samuel's blue eyes. Cole cried when he held his granddaughter for the first time, overwhelmed by the continuation of the family they had built. The twins married as well, Emma to a banker from Silver Bow City, and Grace to a young rancher from a neighboring property. Both couples stayed close to home, building their lives within the community Maggie and Cole had helped foster. Thomas, the baby of the family, proved to have wanderlust like his father once had, spending several years working ranches across the West, before finally settling down with a woman he met in Colorado, and bringing her home to Montana. By the time Maggie was 65 and Cole was 68, they had 11 grandchildren and were starting to see the first of their great-grandchildren. The ranch was now run primarily by Samuel and Thomas, with Cole serving as an advisor and mentor. Maggie had mostly retired from the hard physical work, though she still kept the books and managed the business side of things with the same sharp mind she had always had. One spring morning, Cole woke Maggie before dawn and told her to get dressed. He would not say where they were going, just that it was important. Curious, Maggie pulled on her riding clothes and followed him out to the barn, where he had 2 horses already saddled and waiting. They rode out across the ranch as the sun came up, and Maggie realized where they were going. The old corral, the one where she had been trying to break that stallion all those years ago, was still standing. They did not use it much anymore, but Cole had kept it maintained, the posts straight and the rails sturdy. They dismounted and stood by the fence, looking at the empty corral. Maggie slipped her hand into Cole's, feeling the familiar calluses, the strength in his fingers. "Do you know what today is?" Cole asked. Maggie thought for a moment, then smiled. "It is the anniversary of the day we met, 43 years ago today." 43 years ago today, I rode past this ranch and saw a stubborn woman trying to break a wild horse, Cole said. I had no idea that stopping to help her would change my entire life, that it would give me everything I never knew I wanted, a home, a family, a purpose, a love that has lasted through everything. We have been very lucky, Maggie agreed, leaning against his shoulder. Not lucky, Cole corrected. Blessed? We have been blessed, Maggie. And I wanted to come here today, to where it all started, to tell you that I would do it all over again. Every hard day, every challenge, every moment of fear or doubt, I would do it all again because it brought me here, to this moment, with you. Maggie felt tears sliding down her cheeks, happy tears born of a lifetime of love. I love you, Cole Brennan. I have loved you since you climbed into this corral and showed me how to earn a horse's trust. I will love you until my last breath. They stood there for a long time, two people who had built a life together from nothing but hard work, trust, and love. The sun rose higher, warming the morning air, and birds sang in the distant trees. Finally, they mounted their horses and rode back to the house where their family was waiting. That evening, they gathered everyone together, all of their children and grandchildren, for a big family dinner. The table was crowded and noisy, filled with laughter and conversation. Multiple generations sharing a meal and making memories. Cole looked around at all the faces, seeing his own features and Maggie's reflected back in various combinations, and he felt a profound sense of peace. After dinner, Samuel stood and raised his glass. I want to make a toast, he said, waiting for everyone to quiet down. To my parents, who taught me everything I know about hard work, integrity, and love. They started with nothing but a struggling ranch and a wild dream, and they built all of this. He gestured around the room. They gave us a legacy, not just of land and cattle, but of how to treat each other, how to face challenges, how to build something that lasts. Ma, Pa, thank you for everything. To Ma and Pa, everyone chorused, raising their glasses. Maggie looked at Cole, and he looked back at her, and in that moment, they did not need words. Everything they had built, everything they had become, it was all there in that look, a lifetime of shared experiences, of trust earned and love given, of partnership in its truest form. As the evening wore on and the grandchildren grew sleepy, families began to head home to their own houses scattered across the ranch property. Eventually, only Maggie and Cole remained, sitting in the parlor of the house he had built for her all those years ago. It has been a good life, Maggie said softly. The best, Cole agreed. He stood and held out his hand to her. Come on, let us go to bed. Morning comes early, even for old folks like us. Maggie took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They walked through the house, turning off lamps, checking that the fire was banked, doing the small nightly rituals they had done together for decades. When they finally climbed into bed, Cole pulled Maggie close, her back against his chest, his arm around her waist. It was how they had slept for 43 years. And neither of them could imagine sleeping any other way. I love you, Maggie whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Cole replied, his voice a low rumble in her ear. Always have, always will. They drifted off to sleep, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a legacy together, who had loved each other through youth and middle age and into their golden years. The ranch was quiet around them, peaceful in the Montana night. A testament to what could be built when two people trusted each other completely and loved each other without reservation. Years later, when Maggie was 78 and Cole was 81, they were still going strong. Cole moved a bit slower now, and Maggie's hands ached with arthritis, but they were still active, still involved in the ranch, still deeply in love. They had seen the ranch pass primarily into the capable hands of the next generation, but they still offered advice and guidance when asked. One warm summer evening, much like that evening 43 years earlier when Cole had first declared his love, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Thomas and his wife lived with them now, helping care for them as they aged, but tonight they had the porch to themselves. Do you remember that wild stallion? Maggie asked suddenly. The one I was trying to break when we met? How could I forget? Cole said with a chuckle. He nearly took your head off. I wonder whatever happened to him, Maggie mused. That buyer from back east, I wonder if he had a good life. I am sure he did, Cole said. He was too magnificent a horse not to be valued. You taught me so much that day, Maggie said. about patience, about trust, about approaching problems differently than I had been taught. Those lessons have served me well, not just with horses, but with everything in life. You taught me things too, Cole replied, about courage, about standing your ground, about not giving up even when things seem impossible. You were the bravest person I had ever met, and you still are. Maggie laughed softly. We make a good team. The best, Cole agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn brilliant colors as the sun sank toward the mountains. After a lifetime together, they had earned this peace, this quiet contentment that came from a life well lived and a love well tended. Promise me something, Maggie said after a while. Anything, Cole replied. Promise me that when one of us goes, the other will not give up, that they will keep living, keep finding joy, keep being part of this family we built. Cole was quiet for a moment, then he squeezed her hand. That is a hard promise to make, but I will try, though I cannot imagine this world without you in it. And I cannot imagine it without you, Maggie said. But we have built something bigger than just the two of us. Our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. They are all part of our love story. Even when we are gone, that love will continue. You are getting philosophical in your old age, Cole teased gently. I am getting old, Maggie corrected with a smile. And when you get old, you think about legacy, about what you leave behind. We are leaving behind something good, Cole said firmly. A family that loves each other, a ranch that provides for them, and the example of what a real partnership looks like. That is not nothing, Maggie. No, she agreed, that is everything. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they finally went inside. Thomas was in the kitchen, preparing supper, and he smiled when he saw them. Good sunset? He asked. The best, Maggie said, echoing Cole's earlier words. Just like every sunset we have watched together. That night, lying in bed, Cole held Maggie close and thought about how lucky he was. He had been a drifter once, a man without roots or purpose, moving from place to place without ever really belonging anywhere. Then he had stopped at a ranch where a woman was trying to break a wild horse, and everything had changed. She had given him a home, a purpose, a family, a life worth living. Thank you, he whispered into the darkness. For what? Maggie asked sleepily. For taking a chance on me, for letting me stay, for loving me. Maggie turned in his arms so she could see his face in the dim light from the window. Cole Brennan, taking a chance on you was the smartest thing I ever did. You saved my ranch, but more importantly, you saved me from a life of loneliness. We saved each other. They kissed, a gentle kiss born of decades of love and intimacy, and then settled back into their usual sleeping position. Within minutes, they were both asleep, peaceful and content in the life they had built together. The years continued to pass, as years do. They celebrated more birthdays, more anniversaries, more births and weddings. The ranch continued to thrive under Samuel and Thomas's management, with input and guidance from Cole when needed. Maggie still kept her hand in the business side of things, her mind as sharp as ever, even as her body grew more frail. When Maggie was 82, she fell ill with pneumonia. The doctor came, did what he could, but told the family gently that at her age, recovery was uncertain. Cole refused to leave her side, sitting in a chair next to the bed, holding her hand, talking to her, even when she was too weak to respond. Their children gathered, along with many of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The house was full of family, all of them wanting to say goodbye to the woman who had been the foundation of their family. But Maggie was tough, as she had always been, and after 2 weeks of touch-and-go uncertainty, she turned a corner and began to recover. You are not getting rid of me that easily, she told Cole, when she was finally strong enough to sit up and take notice. We still have more sunsets to watch together. Thank God, Cole said fervently, kissing her hand. I was not ready to let you go. Maggie recovered slowly but surely, and by spring she was back on her feet, moving carefully but independently. The illness had taken its toll, though. She was frailer now, more careful, but her spirit was as strong as ever. On their 60th wedding anniversary, the family threw a huge celebration. People came from all over Montana to pay their respects to the couple who had built one of the most successful ranches in the region. There was food and music and dancing, speeches and toasts, grandchildren and great-grandchildren running everywhere. But the moment Maggie treasured most was late in the evening when Cole led her out to the old corral, away from the noise and celebration. The moon was full, casting silver light over the landscape, and the air was warm and sweet with the smell of prairie grass. 60 years, Cole said, shaking his head in wonder. I can hardly believe it has been that long. It went by so fast, Maggie agreed. And yet, when I think back to that day you rode up while I was trying to break that stallion, it feels like a lifetime ago. We were so young then. We were, Cole agreed. Young and scared and trying to figure out our lives. I am glad we figured them out together. So am I, Maggie said. She looked up at her husband, this man she had spent 6 decades loving. His hair was white now, his face deeply lined, his back not quite as straight as it once was. But when she looked at him, she still saw the handsome cowboy who had taught her about trust and patience, who had loved her through all the challenges and joys life had brought. Dance with me, Cole said suddenly, holding out his hand. There is no music, Maggie pointed out. We will make our own, Cole replied. And so they danced in the moonlight beside the old corral, moving slowly, carefully, their bodies remembering the steps even if their joints protested slightly. Cole hummed a tune, and Maggie rested her head on his shoulder, and for a few perfect minutes, they were young again, newly in love, with their whole lives ahead of them. When they finally made their way back to the house, the celebration was winding down. Their family hugged them, wished them well, and gradually everyone headed home or to the guest rooms prepared for them. Finally, Cole and Maggie were alone in their bedroom, helping each other undress with the familiarity of 60 years together. Best anniversary yet, Maggie declared as they climbed into bed. They just keep getting better, Cole agreed, pulling her close. I love you, Maggie Brennan, more today than yesterday and less than I will tomorrow. I love you too, Maggie replied, her voice muffled against his chest. Always and forever. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, 2 souls who had become one over the course of a lifetime together. Outside, the Montana sky was full of stars, and somewhere on the ranch, a horse whinnied softly in the night. The old corral stood empty but sturdy, a reminder of where it all began, of a wild horse and a fearless woman and a cowboy who stopped to help and ended up finding his home. The next morning, dawned bright and clear, and Maggie and Cole woke with the sun as they had done for 60 years. There was work to be done, family to love, a life to continue living. Hand in hand, they walked out onto the porch to greet the new day, grateful for every moment they had been given, grateful for the trust they had earned from each other all those years ago, grateful for a love that had lasted a lifetime and would echo through the generations to come. Their story was one of courage and persistence, of patience and trust, of 2 people who found each other when they needed it most, and built something beautiful together. It was a Wild West love story, true and deep, the kind that legends are made of. And long after they were gone, their descendants would tell the story of how it all began, with a wild stallion, a determined woman, and a drifting cowboy who said, "Let me show you how to earn his trust," and in doing so, earn the trust and love of the woman who would become his whole world.